Thursday, the 6th of June, 2024, here in Wanaka. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Just note that Gavin is online, joining us online today. Leave of absence requests, Matt?
18th to 26th of July. And here I put a December one in.
Yeah, I'm going to do it.
But it did the 29th.
Well planned. Go for it.
Put it in right now.
Go no?
Third to the 9th. Third to the 9th.
3rd to the 9th of December.
I have one too.
Okay, go.
9th, sorry, 9th to the 12th of July.
And myself, 17th, 18th, and 19th of July.
3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Third, 4th, and 5th of
July.
Yeah. Okay, I move that the requests for leave of absence be approved. Seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, none, motion carry. Declarations of conflict of interest. Declarations.
I just want to note that I was the commissioner on the landscape schedules hearing. And I understand from the mayor, it doesn't require me to stand aside, but just to note that the potential conflict.
No.
Deemed not a conflict.
Definitely
you're
not a
acting as
conflict, but I'm preparing it.
Yeah. Thank you. So no resolution required. There's no matters lying on the table. There's no special announcements. Public forum, we've got one today. Pierre. No, Jules, 3 minutes. Whenever you're go from you.
Kia ora koto katoa. April was the 11th month in a row to break temperature records. We also keep witnessing the consequences of this madness. Delhi in India just experienced 52.9 degrees last week. So most of you will usually make your decisions based on money. For example, the only reason I can think of for this council to support the proposed expansion of the airport is that you think that it will make us more money in the future. Well, a new study recently published in the journal Nature calculated that humanity's income will be reduced by at least 19% in the next 26 years because of climate heating. To give you some context, we are apparently in a recession. GDP went down 0.4% in the last 2 quarters of 2023, and everybody seems quite unhappy about it. Everybody seems to complain about the cost of living crisis, the food prices, etc. Even when government data still shows a 4.1% increase in wages since last year. Now imagine a 19% drop in income. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? And by the way, this study only considers heat increase and changes in precipitation. It does not take into consideration details such as heat waves, sea level rise, tropical cyclones, tipping points, damages to ecosystems, or damages to human health. Another finding of this study is that the future loss of income we have already caused is 6 times higher than the cost of keeping temperatures under 2 degrees of warming. Now is the time to start investing wisely. For example, we all know that our region will run out of electricity soon. If some investments will be necessary to increase our clean electricity supply, first it will be a bargain compared to the consequences of not doing it, but also some solutions are quite cheap. Since the last few years, Aurora has decided to limit rooftop solar export to 5 kilowatts. In a time when we are running out of power in the district, this is nonsensical. Aurora is owned by Dunedin City Council. Maybe you should go to Dunedin to have a chat about it with your colleagues over there. Another tangible solution to our problems is coming from rewiring Aotearoa with the new Electric Farms report. They show that simple policy and regulatory changes will enable farms and local communities to develop mid-sized renewable electricity generation plants, which could fill the gap at a much lower cost than other solutions. Through the district plan, QLDC has the power to help accelerate this transition, and we urge you to do so. To conclude, if a functioning economy is important, misguided and short-sighted economical decisions will condemn us to a life of misery. We urgently need to steer our investments towards what really matters, a decarbonized future. And by the way, by simply not expanding the airport, we would already save $350 million that could be reallocated to actually useful infrastructure. Thank you.
Right, moving on, confirmation of the agenda. The agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. I move. Seconder, please. Thank you, Mel. All those in favour? Right, against? None. Motion carried. Confirmation of minutes of meeting. Any amendments? Anyone? Okay. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council held on the 2nd of May 2024 are confirmed as a true and correct record. The seconder, thank you, Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? None. Motion carried. Right. Item 1, page 24 of your papers, councillors. Queenstown Public Transport Business Case with Tony's with us today.
Two turns.
Tony?
Thank you. I think we'll just hand over to Tony P.
Good afternoon all, thank you. Yes, Queenstown Public Transport Business Case, another substantial part of the wider transport programme, and brought to you today for endorsement, primarily for requesting this to demonstrate the support for that partnership approach. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Questions, councillors? Esther, then I'll go Nikki.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I'm assuming that because it's come this far, that all of the other partners so far have signalled endorsement.
ORC have approved the business case formally. Transport Agency have taken it to their board. Their board outcomes aren't confirmed until their next board meeting. We anticipate it a positive outcome, but we can't confirm that until the next board meeting, which is in June.
Thanks. Question around governance of this. There's lots of groups mentioned in here, the PayTag, way to go. But you know, as a member of the infrastructure committee, this has not been something that we've been across. And I think we need to be. There's a number of assumptions in there. The criticality of the Edith Cavell Bridge for articulated buses by 4th year in, I think, was it? Looking at the arterials 2 and 3, which, we've got an LTP draft, but they're not going to be done, I wouldn't think, in the timeframes that they're assuming in here. So these things are quite critical, and just given the lack of oversight at our level, at a governance level in QLDC, one of the assumptions in the document, I had some concerns about this. And so I guess, could you, for a start, maybe speak to, I think Councillor Smith might have some stuff on governance as well, but could you speak to the Edith Cavell Bridge, arterials 2 and 3, the criticality of those to this project, please?
Yes, I can. Right back to the wider planning for all these high-level transport improvements, it was established that we would take a network approach, and that means that there's really 3 things to that. One is the physical infrastructure, another is public transport services, and the other is behavioural change or travel demand management, as we're calling it. If any of those elements of the physical network aren't provided, then the efficiency impact, or they'll be produced efficiency on, say, the services, and the behavioural change may have to work harder. So we're anticipating that those physical interventions will happen at some stage.
So if we've got like a business cost ratio of, I think it was 2.3 or something. So if we don't do the Edith Cavell Bridge, sorry, arterials 2, arterials 3, then that ratio potentially shrinks further.
Potentially, but it's not the only factor that would be considered in those benefits. It's about growth, where the growth is, how the services are reacting to that.
So how is it linking then? Because there's also a statement in there that a key finding of the preferred option assessment is that we can't maintain a functional network with PT services alone. So one, it might be a struggle to get the efficiency from the PT network if we can't deliver those big chunky infrastructure pieces. But two, even if we do, then it's still a problem. And it feels like this is a land use planning issue, doesn't it? I suppose. And I just wonder, I guess I'm concerned about the lack of governance, and it'd be great to have some suggestions around how we could govern this better to make sure that the right inputs feeding into the other partners. We talk about a partnership arrangement, but I don't feel like.
Can we get a question here? Please?
Yeah, that's a good point. Could you please suggestions around how we could govern this better at our level at QLDC?
Well, I think it's probably more a question for me, rather
Yeah,
than
I
Tony.
don't mind.
I mean, this is a business case that's been put together by those partners. It's got a whole lot of components in there. The Edith Trail Bridge is part of the council's long-term plan. So that's.
The timeframes are a bit iffy for the timeframes in the business case.
We'll also note that the business case, the timing is not perfect in terms of later decisions on the LTP, for instance, as well. So there was a time question around that. Yes, we could have brought this further, I suppose, back to a council workshop, you know. And the time frames, this has been developed by the ORC.
ORC leading, yes.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, do you think, just final question, by us signalling that by endorsing it, what do you think the ORC takes from that? Because I'm just concerned that I see a whole lot of problems with this business case.
So the question's been asked.
What is the ORC going to take from our endorsement? Are they going to take that we can do all the things that have been assumed in the business case?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think it's at that level. I'm in agreement with what's in the business case and general thrust.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, just wanted to comment and ask a question regarding the mode shift numbers, because you know, we know in the 40% mode shift was a target on Frankton Road. I note that we're at, by 2053, we're up to 53% on some of those routes. Where are we currently heading, and are we on track, given that was 6 or 7 years ago we started talking about 40% mode shift? Where are we at in terms of numbers?
I couldn't tell you at this moment in time. We've yet to complete all our monitoring program. And what we do know is that the original sequence of events included works such as is now under the Queenstown package, and they are delayed by at least 3 years. So it was all dependent on various elements being brought together at time in the planning for the wider business case. As those elements have been slightly delayed, so will the expectation that we'll achieve that figure at that stage.
So yeah, I mean, clearly the PT priority on Frankton Road and stuff like that are a key part of that, but so many other pieces. The Stanley Street, this only accounts for interim changes to Stanley Street bus hub. There's still a second stage to that, isn't a major upgrade of the Stanley Street bus hub interchange.
There are 3 different elements to what happens around in the proximity of Stanley Street. On road Stanley Street is the transport agency's upgrade, initial improvements to Stanley Street bus hub and around into Shotover Street. There is the anticipation of the commercial centre, what we know as Project Manawa, and on the other side of the road is the need for a public transport interchange linking Stanley Street bus hub through Athol Street and down into B Street into the town centre.
Yeah, so they're not within those timeframes though, of those initial, they're not accounted for in this.
The immediate or interim changes to Frankton are in terms of their design, and Queenstown on Stanley Street is to allow for the longer vehicles, the articulated vehicles to be accommodated.
Right, okay. And so have ORC funded the depot, given that's one of the big ticket items in here, have they funded that in their 10-year plan?
I don't know, I haven't seen their LTP at this point.
Okay. I mean, that runs to that point is, you know, skin in the game. Have they funded what they said is on their part of this versus, you know, where do our projects fit? But Thanks for that. I mean, I agree that the assumptions are quite optimistic, particularly around arterials, ended up, PT improvement, and the dependent mode shifts are therefore also optimistic because they're dependent on those changes. The direction I think is in,
You got a question?
well,
Getting there.
I was just finishing off with a comment if that's all right, but
Do it in discussion.
okay.
Thank you. Through the chair, just clarification for me, please, staff. I see 2427 Arrowtown, Queenstown, by Mulligan's Road, and I've read further down about initially it's going to be a trial and then line based on feedback. Do you know when that's likely to start as a trial? Arrowtown to Queenstown by Mulligan's Road.
Yeah, so it's partly dependent on when QLDC can put minor improvements in place to put the bus stop facilities in the project. There is some design money available in this year's low cost, low risk, which has already been passed on to the PMO team to action that design. So depending on when we can put the minor infrastructure in place, that's what I understand is the key issue to start that trial.
Thank you.
I've 3 questions. Just on page 34 on demand services, is there any indication, talks the last paragraph there, of integrating this type of activity? Is there any indication of timeline for that, or is that this is just a very high level stage?
Yes, there's a separate investigator. Part of one of the advisory papers talks in more detail about on-demand services and when and where. It's put in here to indicate that that has been considered in the overall approach.
Okay.
Part of the feedback from QLDC officers was about that agility and how frequently this plan is reviewed. So the agreement is that this will be re-looked at every 3 years, and it may be at that time and we'll find that the fixed routes aren't sufficient for particular areas and they need to be boosted by on-demand services.
Okay. The question was just following on a bit from what Nikki raised on the risk side. Page 50, there's the key risks include, and I was wondering whether you talk about the Campbell Bridge and arterials in the sort of content, but they're not so clearly identified as some key risks here. I don't know. I know this is, we can't try to edit this document, but it's just to try and make it clearer that we do have a couple of areas of risk based on the assumptions made. So it's not really a question as well. I suppose no chance to edit this document now. No. Okay. The last question has to do with the answer you gave previously. The notice for this is a partnership thing. Just briefly, what is the likely structure of the partnership for managing and governing this going forward? Like you said, we're going to be reviewing it periodically. So can you briefly what the structure looks like? Is it you and an ORC person at the management level, or is there what sort of grouping is that?
The public transport services are the responsibility and only the remit of the Public Transport Authority, which is a private regional council. Reference to governance in here is the continuance of the joint working, the forum approach under a memorandum of understanding. There is no formal governance proposed.
Okay, so but the joint working group, that's who's that? So I'm just trying to understand. So the joint working group is an ORC QLDC working group, is it?
So there are the groups referred to are the Way to Go partnership, which is the 3 organisations, ORC, NZTA, and ourselves, at a management and board level, but also more recently the PATAG, Public and Anti-Travel Advisory Group. Okay, thank you, QLDC.
Thank you.
Good questions. Cody and our values.
In the staging of the electrification of the bus fleet, it says 2035. Can you speak to why it's staged 11 years from now, considering they won't fall into our carbon zero 2030 strategy?
The key timing issue, as I understand it, is the change in contracts, and it does refer in there that it may be earlier than that time, but it depends on when the contracts for the various operating units are replaced. And that's in the 27 to 30 period. So it may come earlier than that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Excuse me. My question's around endorsing this, how much it locks us into the existing report, what opportunities exist for us to keep developing options. And for one example, park and rides, I see in this that it said there's no park and ride sites due to land values and it's broad sort of Frankton. And my questions would be around a park and ride located further out, for example, bottom of the Crown Range, capturing a potential future route. I know Arrowtown's mainly being used as park and ride as our bus users numbers are going up, but everybody's driving in and parking in there. So saying that we endorse this, I get it's not adoption, so we're not fully responsible for the actions within the plan, but by endorsing it, are we leaving ourselves room to expand on? It's a great start, but overall a little underwhelming in some of our aspirations. How do we beef it up?
Specifically to Park and Ride, this is the second time we have looked at it in quite some detail. There was a separate business case specifically for Park and Ride in the Wakatipu Basin. The third option was 516 Leyden Mile, at a cost of about $9 or $10 million, and dependent on a roundabout being put on the state highway to be in place before that started. Timing wise, that didn't add up. We then looked further out, as you suggest, further out on the eastern corridor, out past Arrow Junction or that location, take advantage of further out and also into the southern corridor. Neither of those options really stood up with the areas of development, the timing of development, or the public transport service that would need to be provided at that time. This is again looked at that. I'd say that this doesn't lock us out of any further investigation. It doesn't lock us out of continually trying to understand what the needs of the transport layer are considered with land use plan. We use the same information across to the spatial planning. We're involved in Ladies Mile, we're involved in structure planning for the southern corridor. The same reasons to bring our understanding from individual projects like this back to that wider outlook. What works and when do we need it?
Because I suppose I have the same concerns over different areas around what are the unintended consequences that you get into through locking into articulated buses and electrified versus a hydrogen fleet, with so much ground being made around the replacement of the overall New Zealand bus fleet within the timeline set by government, where maybe a hydrogen outcome will be feasible within the 30-year period. Are we allowing ourselves to still have a voice and exploring more blue sky thinking around ferries, offline, those other bits by endorsing this, or are we fully locked into what's on?
I don't think it locks us in. I don't think it's our responsibility for, again, public transport is the remit of the regional council. As we continue to advocate on behalf of QLDC and behalf of the community, but it is the remit of others.
And yet it relies on.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that does answer my question. I suppose it brings down to what weight can we put behind making sure that we really are working with accurate demand management and around our projected growth. But thank you. That's my questions for now.
Okay,
Thank you. It's sort of already been touched on already, but the arterials there's been an assumption there that the arterials 2 and 3 specifically are critical to this project or this business case. I'm just wondering how fundamental are arterials 2 and 3 specifically to delivering some of the things in this business case. Articulated buses, for example, would they be impacted without having arterials 2 and 3 developed on time?
Thank you. I mean, the reference is to how efficient this service is, acknowledging that it will be reviewed every 3 years to understand what more is required. The arterials are part of that original network for circulation, for resilience through the town centre. At the moment, we would see that once arterial stage 1 is complete, then we have public transport can hopefully be diverted away onto Stanley. But when they're from there on, where do those buses circulate if they need to turn around and go back out to Frankton? So it's understanding that it says arterials 2 and 3. It's understanding that the wider network needs to be improved to gain the maximum efficiency of this. If we don't have those circulation options, where does the routing go? We stay on the same one path up through town and up through to Perth.
Otherwise, there'll be some interim options, I assume, that might get developed in the meantime.
They would have to find areas to lay over buses and to reverse them on those routes that don't go through the town.
Just knowing the report notes that, or business case notes that the delivery of the Butchers project is not critical to delivering the objectives, but without the project, we make bus service from Sunshine Bay less reliable and affect the circulation buses. In the reference to our trails and NZ up as it refers to those old business cases. Yes, that's the reference.
Okay, Kevin.
Thanks. Yeah, it's not so much a question, but just to acknowledge the work that Tony's been doing with his ORC counterpart in this, public transport, passenger transport. It's lots of moving pieces in the puzzle, but also to note that we continue to have the passenger and active travel group advisory group meetings with ORC, where a lot of these things get discussed and revisited as we go on. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Kevin, on endorse that as well. We do discuss this quite heavily during BATAG as well. Okay.
Just a question around.
No, you've already had your question. Sorry.
Okay,
So,
well, we won't know how.
Okay.
Assumptions about
Discussion.
funding.
Do I have a mover? Of course.
Are we going to discussion?
We are.
I've got to move it, second it first. Do I have any mover, of course? Thank you, Matt. I'll second. Right, discussion.
All right.
Well, I guess just a bit of commentary and a few things that I'm unsure of, which we might just discuss. So we've got the fastest growing patronage at the moment in the country to our public transport, which is amazing because it gives us the momentum that we need to kind of kick this off. There's some information about cutting the bus lanes on Ladies Mile, and I think that the 2018 integrated transport strategy, gave us the why behind it all, but that was a key component. Are the bus lanes still happening at Ladies Mile as far as we know?
We'll discuss it. Question time's over.
Yeah, but we can still discuss this.
Yeah, but the officers part of this.
Meeting.
Well, let's
allow us
discuss
to
it
make an
between
informed decision.
What I'm trying to.
Standing orders. So
It's your discretion.
Okay, well, I'm not really asking a question. I'm just trying to figure out.
I can contribute to a discussion if that's useful.
Yeah,
I mean,
thank
I understand that the additional stages of the NZ Up program or the Queenstown transport package that are undelivered by the current package are still proposed to be put through the RLTP process and put to the NLTP, which is to seek funding as to whether they meet the priority or not, and at what timing remains uncertain. But the plan is obviously to progress with those, but we just don't know when or how that will occur, and so that does remain an uncertainty for us. But yeah, I mean all this comes back to the Queenstown Integrated Transport Plan that we're still on the same pathway. We've clearly got challenges in terms of timeframes around delivery, but in when we're going to get there. But it's clearly still intended to. Well, I suppose, and once again, the government's priorities are changing, so they're less interested in public transport at this point in time, so that might cause delays. But we're still on, still in our program, and that seems to be reflected by the chief executive's nod. Still the path we're heading down.
Further discussion?
Yeah. Look, I didn't get to ask a question about funding, but just wary of the fact that the ORC has tried to distribute the costs of public transport already across the Upper Clutha and Kingston and Auckland, despite there being no services there. This doesn't consider QLDC's costs and the rating impact in our debt ceilings at all. It seems to consider maybe the ORC's cost, but I'm just not sure about how do we fund this. Even if we can fund it in the right timeframes, it's not enough to achieve the outcomes. I think, to me, there's two things here that I'd like to see going forward. Really good governance at QLDC level. I want to see that infrastructure committee involved in this and having oversight so that we know what is going on in the pay tag and in the way to go. and there need to be regular meetings and things need to be updated. Like if the Way to Go team hasn't met for a long time, and if this is sort of somewhat old, it needed refreshing, you know, in terms of what we're putting into our draft long-term plan, because it's just not realistic. And I think our planning teams and our strategy teams need to be looking at this and planning their work in relation to how we are going and achieving the various pieces, because it feels to me like we're out of sync and we've got all of this growth, but we really haven't got the funding and the financing available to deliver it. So, you know, to me, reading this, it's just a complete read, and I'm struggling to endorse it, because at this point it should be as up to date as possible. You've got to accept that over time things will shift, and you know, down the track you'll need to revisit, but at the point we're endorsing it, it should be up to date and accurate. And I'm all for public transport and for having a plan, but if I'm endorsing a business case which should set out a good business case, this doesn't, because it's already old and it makes so many assumptions and it doesn't consider funding, and I'm really disappointed. So that's where I'm at with it.
Any further discussion, councillors?
Since I moved it.
Okay. Yeah, you're the final speaker, so everyone will agree with that. Go for it.
No one else wants to speak.
I just wanted to
I
highlight.
know you've already spoken, so there you go.
No, I certainly hear what Nikki's saying for sure, and I think that this document is moving us in a direction that's putting a pig in the sand, if you like. I think it will evolve. Absolutely, it needs to evolve, and I agree that we should have the most up-to-date information here. But I guess we're in trying times at the moment. I guess for us, I think we're all on board with trying to get more PT, more to travel, more everything, to set us in the right course. Am I pleased with this particular document? How I want to see it? No, but we need to progress. We need to move it forward.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll put it to the vote. It's the three resolutions before you. Moved by Matt. Two, sorry. I'm on the wrong page. Seconded myself. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Just one.
Thank you.
Motion carried. Moving on. Page 2, proposed waste fees and charges. Well, in my notes it says Laura's turning up. But Simon?
Very astute, I am not Laura. She has done well.
Simon?
Good afternoon. And I'm very happy to quickly say, invite questions and take the paper as read.
Questions, councillors?
Quick question. This is just a procedural one. I just seem to remember that we the waste fees went through a consultation process last time with all of the other fees and charges. Just wondering why that didn't happen this time, or I may have got it wrong.
So historically, we typically take the waste fees through separately. I think last time they did go through the consultation process. This time we were unable to get the information together in time. It's not one we're obliged to consult on.
That's fine.
And yeah, we're going to struggle to get them in place to ready for 1 July, which is our target this month. We'll go through the consultation process.
And the other one was just around, look, and you probably can't answer this, so no pressure, but it's just to note, and if you can answer it, great, just the internal costs. It spoke to the internal costs, sort of lifting things up, and I'm just interested across the board actually in understanding what those generic sort of internal costs related to fleet, related to, you know, corporate costs, related to how they're driving costs up across the organisation. Do you have any?
Yeah, there's a few parts to that, and I can talk quickly and Tony might want to add to it. So yeah, interest and depreciation has been a significant component of our internal costs. Interest rates are going up. See our debt levels are relatively high. In addition, you know, the council has grown. It's just increasing corporate costs, and that's a factor of it. It's a very high level answer, but that's the process.
Into it later. Thanks. That's not.
Okay. Thank you for. Well, sorry, I'm not sure if you authored the report.
I didn't know. Thank Laura. But
thank you to Laura and the other person. Who was it? Kate. The report is really comprehensive. the key changes are ETS, unique emissions factors, landfill levies, and stewardship, public stewardship of tyres. So I think for the public watching and for us, it's good to understand that. I guess the question is around how hard it is to ensure what we budget for it, given the fluctuations of the ETS and the unique emissions factor. And you've kind of outlined it quite well. Do you think that we're on track now for the year ahead in terms of averaging that out and budgeting for it?
Yeah, so we
The
try
growth.
and buy those units in advance so that we have some budget certainty. See, in this instance, it actually hasn't done us favours. We've bought it
Yeah,
the last
I
and the
know.
prices have come down.
Yeah.
But we need to have that budget certainty for each financial year. The UEF is set annually, so again, we've got confidence this year. There is some uncertainty into the subsequent years. This is looking to be a legislation change, which will mean that the UEF is likely to increase again. Yes.
Are you pretty confident on the certainty that you've baked
Yeah,
in?
I'm pretty confident. Obviously, tonnages through the transfer station have a pretty significant bearing on the budget as well.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I feel comfortable.
Question?
Yeah.
Thank you. The report refers to the increase in fees in the potential, if we went to 22.7%, I think it is, that may have unintended consequences of legal dumping. Do we have much evidence of that being the case?
No, I guess that's just highlighting a risk rather than evidence. We haven't been in a position, this is one of the biggest increases we've had to apply or seek in regard to the gate fees for waste disposal. So there is a risk that people find it's unaffordable and take alternative, less desirable routes.
I just wondered, is there potential for us in the future to consider that risk all the time when we always come below what we should be charging to recover those costs?
Yeah, I guess waste is a tricky one, because also we're trying to motivate better behaviour around the generation of waste. Pricing is quite useful either achieve that goal.
Thank you. I've got a question around your tyre product stewardship scheme. Just if you can give us a little bit more detail on our assurance that the pre-disposal fee collected by Tyrewise and things, do you think that's going to effectively roll out and cover our costs? And also just any interest around where is the market for recycled tyres? How far away do they take these things and what do they use them for?
All good questions, and I'm not sure I'll be able to answer all of them. So there's still some details being worked out with Taiwan. Obviously, this December's coming at us quite quickly. There are some details we're unsure. We'll still be collecting the tyres, and then they'll collect from us. We're not allowed to charge for the collection. We'll pick up the tyres from our transfer station or whatever site we agree on, and they'll cover all the costs from that. What?
Would there be any assurances on how often and things they collect, or are we looking to be
That's
stockpiled?
exactly what we're trying to work through at the moment. There are some challenges. Currently, we don't have a lot of real estate at our transfer stations. We don't hold tyres for very long. We get them through to the landfill, we're then stockpiled and taken away. So we foresee some challenges with the new regime, and they're trying to get responses from Taiwan. Don't have a lot more to share, sorry. And also, I can't answer read the markets. Back to you.
Thank you.
But also there's an ongoing uncertainty around some of the government's future changes around some of these things. It might have quite an impact on the waste levies and charges. So we just need to be noting that things are coming at us quite quickly. So they're in a good position here. Government changes may impact on that. So we just need to be aware of that.
I think you're referring to the UEF change.
So that increase health and safety risks, the storage of large quantities of tyres, will get into that position?
We simply wouldn't be able to store large quantities of tyres on our existing sites.
Thank you.
No further questions. To proposed resolution before, do I have a mover? Sorry, Gavin.
No, sorry. It's just again to say, thanks to the staff for their work in pulling this together. And I was also going to add that if I'm allowed to, I'll be happy to move it when it comes to that.
Again, we've got a mover, we have a seconder. Thank you, Ferg. Discussion?
Totally take Simon's intro's point around, we're trying to drive better behaviour and increasing the cost is a good thing, because hopefully we'll get able to generate less waste and maybe to move it on as well and have it recycled. I just think there's a part to play for council here in looking at providing those alternatives, just like with public transport. I want people to not be driving their cars and parking around the district, but we have to supply public transport or enable it or play our part in making sure it's there for people so they've got a choice. We have to do the same thing with waste and ensure that we enable or ensure that there are those choices available for people, so that it's not a choice between paying a lot of money and dumping. There's actually a pathway to do something else with some of the stuff that we've generated, like construction waste. So just wanted to say a little bit on that.
I guess just comment about the fact that I think, the changes that we've seen at a central government level are changing behaviour hugely. So I think we can note that can change again, but the behaviour changes that we're setting up in terms of composting, etc. as well, do give those choices. So, it's looking better than it ever has historically, I think, apart from the growth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
3 proposed resolutions before you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 3, page 64, ratification of independent hearings panel recommendations on the priority area landscape schedules variation. And that is a mouthful. There you go. Good morning.
Indeed. Time flies. Thanks, we'll take the paper as well. If there's any questions, we're happy to try and assist.
Questions, councillors?
Just one on, it says on point 3 of the recommendation that there will be some amendments made. So it says direct staff to amend the PDB provisions and reflect the recommended change and to correct minor errors and make changes. Do those all get reported to Planning and Strategy Committee?
Can you speak to the?
Yeah, through the chair. A clause 16 error is usually for something like a typo or something that's wrong in terms of numbering, and I have delegation authority to sign those off. We keep a record of those so anybody can see when we've made those minor changes to the proposed district plan. But they are for those really, really minor things.
Okay, that's great. I think I have one more here. I can't. I think it was around monitoring, whether certain conditions are how it's playing out. Sorry, I can't remember where I need to be in my papers because my writing's terrible. But could you just speak to how that monitoring of those provisions will be done? I just don't have any concept of it.
I think we'd probably have to have a think about that, because that's sort of a recommend. I think that's in chapter 3 as well. That's a recommendation that's come out of that report. But I think we'll have to sort of look at how we could do that, possibly through what resource consents have come in, or through Section 35 monitoring or something like that.
Right.
So I think we'll sort of get together and think about how we can do that.
And again, that's something that would be discussed with the planning committee. Or yeah, great. Thank you.
So just a quick follow on from that, just in simple terms, we've got, it's a big lot of reading there, a lot of information. In practical terms, when someone puts in a resource consent, can you just very briefly show how these landscape schedules will be used to help within the resource consent in the future?
Yeah, sure. So through the chair, at the moment, you have to get a landscape assessment done without any sort of starting point. So what these schedules do is they tell you the values that need to be protected for ONLs and the values that need to be maintained or enhanced for rural character landscapes. So what it will do is ensure that every landscape assessment starts off at the same point, looking at the same sort of things and not a case-by-case assessment.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. On page 65, paragraph 8, it states that by identifying landscape values, character and amenity values, it provides clarity on what is being sought to be protected, maintained, or enhanced. I guess one of the things that I struggled with being on when I was on the planning committee was there's many, but one of the things that I struggled with was looking at it from a planning lens and trying to figure out how we protect or enhance ecological values. I know that this isn't devised for that purpose, but could you speak or just give me a little bit of sense of how it might help to protect actual ecological values rather than just, you know, the aesthetics of what we're looking at?
Yeah, so in terms of ecological values, it could help to protect ecological values if they were sort of part of the values that sort of form the ONL.
Okay.
So
if the habitat values have got biodiversity or whatever, like that in it.
yeah, if the biodiversity was significant, it would be better done through being a significant natural area or something like that. But if there are biodiversity values that contribute to the ONL values, then they would be protected as part of it being an ONL.
Okay. All right. So it gives greater clarity going through the resource consent process on that aspect of it. Okay.
And to add just through the chair, as part of the original starting point with these schedules, we had, as well as landscape experts, we had biodiversity experts who were looking at each of those priority areas as well from that lens in terms of the existing information that we had, and if there was anything additional, the existing information would have come from our SMA layers that we've already got, but then of other information that's available in terms of those values.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Mover?
Yep.
Thank you, Nikki. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mel. Any discussion?
I'd just like to make a couple of comments if appropriate. Firstly, I wanted to thank Jane Taylor and Peter Kensington, who were the commissioners that I worked with on this plan change. I found it a very positive experience working with them and the work that they did. Secondly, I want to acknowledge the work that staff did around the pre-hearing conferencing. That was a unique, possibly unique situation here where many of the complex issues were resolved prior to the hearing and made our job a lot easier once we got to that point. So that, yeah, there was a large level of agreement between the private consultants and the council's experts prior to the incoming. So there were a whole bunch of submitters that pulled out. There were a whole bunch that just agreed with where the expert conferencing got to. Yeah, so just wanted to acknowledge that was really useful to the panel. I'm not going to make a pitch or anything around your recommendations, but you know, in the report, so I'm not going to make any further comment on that. But I just wanted to make those particular observations.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Thanks to staff and thanks to the commissioners for the work on this as well.
Any further discussion? No. Put to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4, retrospective approval of Queenstown Lakes District Council submissions, fast track approvals bill and Otago Regional Council draft 2024-34 long-term plan. Very short. Yeah. Oh, the Kerry's got, oh no, now it's look at that. That delegation slow down. I'm sorry, there's no one sitting next to you, Luke, so it's you.
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. So the report, as mentioned in the title, requests the approval of 2 submissions that we've made recently on fast track approval bill and the ORC long-term plan. The key messages are set out in paragraphs 11 and 22 of the report, and the submissions are attached. State the rest of the report is read and take questions.
Questions? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, have you presented to the panel the select committee or whatever it is yet?
Not yet. Planned next week.
It's planned for next week. Second question is, why did we choose not to take a supporting or opposing position in its entirety. I mean, I think this is a pretty bad piece of legislation, and I think that we should have been stronger in our opposition to it. I appreciate the comments that have been made are productive and provide some guidance as to if it is approved, this is what we recommend. But I question why didn't we take a really firm line and say this is pretty rubbish and we should oppose it.
Well, I would reflect on over the past 8 years of being either holding the pen on these or supporting the people holding the pen on this. This was one of the hardest submissions to land a collective position around a council table. So as a result of which we had some that were very supportive, but wanted a lighter touch in terms of emphasis and emphatic language, and some who wanted a heavier touch in terms of emphasis and emphatic language. And we actually tried our best to walk a line that was clearly disapproving, but was also relatively measured. And we tried to take a steer from the mayor as a final point, having collated all the inputs from the group. But it was very difficult, and I do appreciate that for some around the table, the language is not strong enough. And particularly given the time that's elapsed since we put this through. And I think in the popular discourse, there is a much broader discussion of some of the failings in this particular legislation as well.
Have you listened to or followed some of the other submissions in I suppose forming your view for the hearing, or to put when you turn up before the committee? But you know, a particular note was Simon Upton's submission, which was very strong, keeping in mind that he was a former national minister and an independent advisor to both governments. His submission was very powerful and very strong, as well as a number of other worldwide Wildlife Foundation and there's countless submissions, Forest and Bird and all sorts of things that have really, I think, provided a lot of context. Have you been following that?
We have been following those. I think it's very interesting. I mean, our role as officers is to reflect your position. However, I think is Glenn speaking to the case? Yeah, so there is the option for further exposition should it be desired.
Okay, just a signal that I'd like to see us consider making a stronger stance when we appear before, and I'm happy to suggest that amendment if there's the opportunity, that we take an opposing view before the commission.
I think there are some limitations to that. Council has the speaking rights in front of the submission to Ms. Licking, not to change council.
Within the scope of
it has to be within the scope of the submission that the made. Council can reduce its scope, but can't increase its scope.
I just want to fully support what you've just said in your questions, and my questions were pretty much identical. I guess, yeah, as we've watched this, you know, come to fruition in the media, etc. as well. There's very eminent people saying things like, this is more about getting bad things done fast. I think the question that I have is, can we within scope emphatically push the points that we've made that are within scope and speak to it that way? I think what we missed, and you can maybe give me some your sense of this, I think what we missed is that it was really thorough and many useful recommendations.
Yes, question.
I've got a question, but I have to set the scene, otherwise I can't ask a question. So the bill basically completely misses considering climate mitigation, adaptation, and our international obligations around that. It misses the emissions budget. It's only mentioned once. And it also misses democratic rights, treaty rights, natural justice and procedural. So you did touch on some of those. But I guess my question is, what did you consider cross-referencing like other submissions or other legislation that relates to these things, such as climate change and treaty rights?
Through the chair, yes, certainly that was something that I guess is bundled up in the principle of, I think we talk a lot about the purpose of the bill and how it's not representative of the full range of things that joint ministers want to take into account in making decisions under the under the process of the bill. So it talks about how we think the bill should incorporate similar wording than the purpose of the Resource Management Act. It doesn't go so far as to say it should replicate the Resource Management Act purpose, but it talks about the for well-beings and future generations. So in a way, it sort of captures that, not necessarily in specific terms that you're saying, but it certainly does allude to the fact that we think there needs to be a wide range of considerations rather than simply the significant benefits of the project.
One addition to that, we did actually share this with the climate reference group as well. We took the approach that the climate reference group would put in their own submission, and the rationale for that was because they wanted to go pretty extensively into that space. We are mindful when we're writing these submissions that we want to get our point across, but we are also in a relationship building phase with some parts of government as well. So that is a factor that has to be taken into account with our advocacy work. And that is potentially why it made more sense to lean into the inherent meaning contained within other legislation, which is stylistically potentially different to how we've positioned things previously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, the Chair. Around our response in paragraph F, the fast track bill should focus on providing a fast track, not an easy track. Have we got any indication from government around DCs being maintained or made better through any resultant outcome of this? Is that something we would speak to strongly in our
Development contributions you're talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah, something that I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I'm not 100% sure on what your intention is around that. Sorry.
It's just to us if the bill doesn't protect or
there's anything in the bill that actually steps away from those financial obligations. Obviously, the government has a broader program of work around funding, finance, and review of all forms of sort of funding and charges, so that it's not specifically modified by this particular legislation. To my knowledge.
Is that something we should flag early to government that we really need?
Well, I think it is, I mean, the whole question of funding is a very live issue to government already. And, you know, to the extent that we've engaged with a number of government agencies fairly regularly on funding and on funding collection models, then, yeah, I think that's there, but we can certainly continue to advocate on those topics to government or to the relevant ministries. I think the other party probably is Te Wahangana. The Infrastructure Commission is doing quite a bit of work in that funding space as well.
But perhaps through Chair, if I can just add to that, there's a three-phase approach to the RMA reform that the government set out that they're pursuing over a number of years, and so that while development contributions may be talked about under those future reforms, but certainly having a signal as to how those will shape up in detail at this stage.
This is phase 2.
Thanks. I just want to agree with Quentin and Esther. I would be an emphatic no on this one. I think the bill is really dangerous, and I was just a bit disappointed when we obviously not all of these submissions can be dealt with and go through the process and be agreed in this room by the council before they're put to government. But I think we've gotten the habit as council of assuming that we'll get them in at the last minute and we'll get some comments in the background from councillors and we'll put in a submission and I'm building up to it, just give me a minute, and we'll agree it retrospectively. But I think we've got in the habit of always doing that, and I think we lose something.
Councillor, can I please have a question?
I think we lose something in that we don't sit around this table and we're not held to account as elected members for our position in the background.
One more go. I'll ask if you can please give a question, and then if you don't, I'll just move on.
So can you please give us some background as to why you didn't this time round sort of acknowledge that it was a highly political issue, because there was quite a long period for this one. It wasn't like a 3-week sort of, and I
think maybe 5.
I guess where we what's the question? Slightly rattled. can we find a way to make sure that some of these really political ones have a process around it? Because I know that in the background there were a few emails backwards and forwards. I think about 4 or 5 councillors had any input at all, and then a decision was made based on that.
I can answer that
Yeah.
question. So effectively, there is a process. So there is a behind the scenes is a very extensive process of making sure this goes through various gates of approval and various stages. You may have only seen 3 or 4 responses, but we may have had direct responses back from councillors that didn't copy everyone in as well. So I would say there was a strict process in place. Now, 5 weeks actually isn't very long when you consider that we have to have a paper into council 3 weeks in advance. So actually the ability to engage with our climate reference group, to engage with other partners and other voices and the entire organisation, as well as then our councillors, it's actually a really lengthy process, and 5 weeks is no time at all. So habitually we do not want to do it this way. But I cannot recall a time when actually the timings have fit with our council schedule to enable us to do it.
Given that we can't, because I appreciate that, we have now a really well-formed process for community grants with a process for setting out, how there must be a way that we can make this, our opinions, democratically accountable, or can be held democratically accountable for our positions on this, which drive the content of the submissions. Because at the moment, as you say, we didn't even know, you're saying there's emails that the rest of us didn't see. So there are councillors who said one thing.
Please have a question.
Can you please look at a way to make it so that this process and how we feed into it is democratically accountable?
We will take the feedback and give it some thought.
Okay, so can I just make the point that there's nothing to say that it's not democratic at the moment. Council does approve every submission that is formal submission that's made, or substantive submissions. So council does have a choice to do that. We do endeavour to make sure that councillors do have a voice. And I would also note that while this was 5 weeks, we also had no daylighting of the provisions of the bill until the day it was actually introduced into the House. So in fact, there was a relatively short time frame for us to respond.
I just need to respond to that because this.
I
need to. Sorry, it's not democratic.
Order. Right. You've had a fair few goes now. They've asked for questions, so we're moving on. Right. Any further questions?
Can I just ask that we take these 2 items separately?
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll get to it when people. Right, we've got a motion before us. 1, 2, and 3. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Barry. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Lisa. You want to do it in parts? Can we do?
You can note the reports as together, but 2 and 3 separately.
I just want to. There's further discussion within that.
Yep.
So I'm just going to make the point that I was going to make earlier. So it's not democratically accountable to sit around this table right now and agree or disagree this bill. We're in a position now where we've put a bill which has really useful stuff in it. Thank you very much. That will be useful to the select committee, but we're in a position of having to not agree it because we don't like the substantive position on neutral versus opposed versus for. We can't make the distinction. If I decide now not to agree this, then all that valuable stuff that's in that submission doesn't go forward, right? I'm not in a position to add that we don't agree it. So it is not democratically accountable because the community does not know who in the background said no, an emphatic no to this bill, and who said I support it. And that's why it's not. And I just want to make that really clear because there's a difference.
Oh, I disagree. You've got the right opportunity right now to express to the community whether you support it or not. If you only don't support, you might support a lot of it. If there's key parts you don't support, you just vote against it. So otherwise, that's the democratic process. We've had input to it. We got to a point. There's bits in there that I don't agree with too. Quite a few bits in there, but the majority of it I do. So I'll be voting for it. If you don't agree with parts of it, vote against.
No, but that's the point.
Hang on, no.
Well, you've got to decide where you sit on.
Would everyone be accountable for what they said behind the scenes?
Councillors, it's not a back and forth.
I apologise, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I take Lyle's comment on board, and I will take this opportunity to make my stance clear. I agree that the points that are being made are better to be made than not be made, and I'm in an awkward position there because secondly, that this piece of legislation is one of the worst pieces of legislation that has been put to this government in decades.
Yeah.
And it is Trumpian in nature, and I don't use that word lightly.
The language being used, Mr. Chair.
Just Trumpian, okay, well, it breaches, well, it puts at risk most of the strategic work that we do as a council, the district plan, the spatial plan, the landscape protection, all these sorts of things that I'm aware of at least 10 potential fast track applications that would affect our district. And I've noted and written them down. They range from some that have some merit to some that have ridiculous, and some that have already been defeated multiple times in our existing processes. So I will vote in favour of, because of the value of the other items that we are, the valid points we are making it, but I'll make a very strong statement now that I strongly oppose this legislation, and I would have preferred that we take that stance.
Thank you, through the chair. I would like to thank the staff for the efforts they did make to gather councillor input on this very challenging piece of legislation, and I think we all agree that if central government were held to the same level of transparency and account that we're held to at local government, there might be different processes before us. To hear that central government are allowed to pull a number of submitters out of a hat to hear opinions regarding the fast track bill compared to some of the local government process we have to go through is quite outstanding. And however, I will be voting in support of this, although I have huge concerns around the overall impacts of the bill, because I agree that it's important that we get the items across that we need to, and that all across our process we're not given really adequate ability to respond to central government in ways that we'd like to see fit. So have some challenges with the bill itself, but thank you to staff for trying to get some form of measure out of all of our responses. But I disagree that we didn't have a chance to have input. I know there were different ways that many of us did input, but I think there was democratic process followed, and that if anyone didn't have their say through the process, I would be surprised.
I'll just go Gavin first.
Yes, I just wanted to, I guess, say where I'm at with it. I mean, there's a lot of work gone into it, which I appreciate. The work that has gone into it, it's a considered submission that represents the view of the community, the council as a community, as an organisation representing the community. It's been put together on the expectation that the bill is likely to be passed in some form or other. Obviously, there's a process for that to go through yet, to try and get, and have some influence on, modifying it in whatever way possible to better suit us. But, it's not necessarily going to reflect each of our own personal opinions, and that's just the way it works, I guess. So, I'm satisfied that it's been put together with the right intentions. Thanks.
Yeah.
I also just want to say thank you, because I understand the challenge that you're in, and that we're in a relationship with central government as well, and that you're trying to navigate a lot. And I think there's many very useful recommendations in it. I think that the challenge, as we've kind of traversed right now, is that we retrospectively prove things, and sometimes that's just not going to go our way. So the same as what's been said, like there's no way I would ever approve, like I would just oppose this if it was left to me. Given that we are where we are, and we're going to be speaking to this next week, I will approve it retrospectively. But I just publicly state that I'm fully opposed to this in every shape and form, because it is, I guess, shamelessly going against all of our obligations in New Zealand. And also, I think it's really interesting that we have the inquiry into the climate adaptation plan at the moment. And Minister Simon Watt stated we need an enduring and long-term approach to show leadership and joined-up thinking. So what this bill does is it offers a concurrent way to basically, you know, put aside any safeguards that we have with our treaty and our environmental obligations. So fully opposed, but given where we are, I will approve it today. Thank you.
No further discussion. Right, we'll just do the easy one first. Note the contents of the report. So all those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Got that one? Okay. Number 2. Approve retrospectively the QLDC submission to the Environment Select Committee on the fast track bill. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Put yourselves into.
No, it's just better
3,
than that.
approve retrospectively QLDC submission to the RC on its draft 2024-34 long-term plan. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Motion carried 1, 2 and 3.
And that was a really good submission.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item 5, Chief Executive's report, page 103 of your papers.
So, Mr. Mayor, you can see there's only really one substantive item there, and that's the attendance and voting proxy for the LGNZ annual general meeting. So it's the standard recommendation that the mayor be given that proxy and is required to vote on the council position on any of the agreements put forward.
And just to touch on that, we've only just had one remit. It's come to my attention that was half an hour ago. So we'll be discussing those as they come in.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the usual practice, the circulator table of the remits, and we'll vote those in. And
that's right. I think we'll use the same process we've used every year. I don't think we'll see those body of remits coming through until probably June, perhaps late June. It is June, isn't it?
It's June. It is really June.
July, sorry. My brain.
Okay, well, I'll move 1 and 2. Thank you, Barry. Any discussion? None at all. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Councillors, I declare the meeting closed at 2:12.